tie?
Didn't get the memo, no ties.
You can tell me.
I'm not telling you that. That's true.
But I have to think about it.
Because otherwise, I don't.
Maybe I'm hacked.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this I got it from Lawrence.
Board recessed yesterday on the 3rd, about 5 o'clock or so we are now September 4th,
You didn't tell me.
continuing our budget
Here we
hearing.
go.
You want me to resay it? You want
Sure.
to delete that and
Please.
start over
Go
again?
ahead.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for coming again today and looking forward to continuing the educational process we went through yesterday. In summary, I think this process is obviously a bit time consuming for everybody, but I think it's well worth the effort, especially at this juncture in our history here in reference to the budget. So looking forward to it. I think without any further ado, unless Mr. Nichols, you have any announcements you'd like to make, board members, anything you'd like to add at this time?
We just proceed with the schedule.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson knows that he's sort of
On
filled
call?
in sometime this morning. I told him approximately 11 o'clock, but he's in the building today.
Well, we'll certainly see what we can do to kind of catch up. We were a little bit off yesterday, so for those in the audience, obviously planning and building services, economic development was put off till today. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome our esteemed district attorney, Mr. Bob Burns. Good morning, Robert. It's good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. To begin with, thank you for the accommodation on scheduling. I know that I was set for yesterday, but Tuesday is, and that's probably one of the principal reasons you don't ever see me at board meetings, is because Tuesday is a big felony court day. And I personally participate in that calendar every week.
We certainly appreciate that. Appreciate your service.
The accommodation, thank you.
Tab 11, I believe, Julie, is that correct?
11.
And so, to begin with, the district attorney's office budget for this year, which is really several different budgets, 107, 108, 130, has several assumptions. One of those assumptions is status quo for FTEs across the different budgets. 10.5 FTEs, and they're broken down in different ways. I can go through those if you like. I'm more than happy to. There was a time when we had what I would call 3 outside grants. We had the statutory rape vertical prosecution program, the spousal abuser prosecution program, and also the victim witness program. We are down 2 out of 3 of those. The spousal abuser grant was essentially reduced to so little, it's not worth basically the application process, the effort to put into the grant. The statutory rape vertical prosecution grant was also essentially eliminated from the state. And so we have continued to maintain status quo in terms of FTEs with what we have left, criminal division 130 budget, as well as victim witness program budget. You'll note that the victim witness budget, and this is a budgeting technique I have employed since first elected in 1998, and that is through the use of grants to support as much FTE as possible, and then with criminal division, having to rely on general fund for the least next amount necessary to maintain the status quo. That's not changed. Victim witness, I think you'll see in the 108 budget is essentially, other than all of the other mandatory minimum insurance type costs, it's all dedicated to salaries and benefits, or position, if you will. And of course, my budgets are no different than any other departments. The lion's share of it is dedicated to salaries and benefits And services and supplies makes up, a relatively smaller portion. In my particular budget, in the 130-0431, I think you'll see it's approximately 75 to 25, 75% being salaries and benefits, and approximately 25% being services and supplies, roughly. Again, some of the assumptions are there's no request for increase, obviously. I know it is not the time to be coming forward and asking for an increase. I recognize that. I think it's also fair for me to say that the activities of the office are essentially at full tilt right now. That is, there are no employees in the office that are not functioning at basically critical mass in terms of volume of work. We're in court 5 days a week. We're in court early in the morning, and we're in court late at day, late at the end of the day. And so it goes without saying that employees are being called upon to do more with less all the time. This is certainly nothing new to you. We do have some inefficiencies that have grown in the last few years in terms of the operation. Obviously, we're in 2 locations, the Brashear Street facility, and we're also in the main courthouse. But now, as well as the issues with supervision that are associated with being located in, having staff in 2 locations, the travel time back and forth, which is, it's just across the street, but still, it takes time, and there's an inefficiency there. We are also now obliged to travel across town for the first time to attend court. In the 20 years that I've been here, that is new. It used to be that we would walk upstairs or walk across the parking lot and complain about snow removal and, lack thereof. Now it's quite different. We are multiple times a day. There are multiple calendars during the day. For example, this morning there's one at 8 o'clock. There'll be a second call later this morning, probably at 11 or 11:30. There's going to be preliminary hearings at 1 or 1:30 this afternoon. There's going to be an in-custody calendar this afternoon at 4 o'clock in a different department. Those typically are staffed by different lawyers and for different purposes. Some because of grant issues, some because of simply training issues and experience issues. And so, but people are going down and back for each. And some are taking their personal cars. Many are taking their personal cars and not claiming the mileage for it. Some are claiming the mileage for it. I require that if they're going to claim the mileage for it, that they ought to seek out the use of the department vehicle first. And that they need to take the department vehicle first if it's available. If it's not available, then they can use their personal vehicle and claim mileage. So, but there are inefficiencies. We have, in essence, a 1990s computer system purchased with, by Ridgely Lazard and the approval of this board. That is, it's 1990s. We've seen so many different changes in computer operating systems since then, mostly planned by the computer developers, I'm sure, but we are continuing to dedicate time and attention to keeping this case management system, which most modern DA's offices have to run on, short of running the Rolodex card index, which is the way it used to be, a card file, if you will, like you might see in a library. But that's aging, to say the least. There is something to be said about we're staffing in the inefficiencies, I guess I want to say, and I'll be delicate about this. We have a new judge, and as would be expected, we're spending a little more time staffing that courtroom than we might have in the past. And that's to be expected, and it's changing, it's improving, I think, considerably, but nevertheless, in the early term, it's taken a little more staffing, and that's okay. I think that was to be expected. I don't view that necessarily as a negative anyway, it's just that it's happening. So I guess my message to you in my opening statement here, if you will, is for several years, I've been presenting to you my budget, and for several years, we've been operating basically in a cut-to-the-bone type approach. Minimum necessary supplies, services and supplies, and salaries and benefits to keep the prosecution function in this county going, basically at bare bones level. I don't view that there is room for a significant cut, short of a staffing cut. And we've said this before, and I'll say it again. The next thing on the block is an employee. And for my office, it's not clerical, it's legal, it's an attorney. That's the only room I see, and I don't see that as room. There'll be some dramatic choices that have to be made if that were to occur. And if we lose one of the 4 lawyers in the office, myself included, that is to say I'm one of 4, that would essentially be 25% of the legal staff in the office. With that nice little rosy outlook, I'm happy to address any of the particular budgets. There's 107, that is the, I'm just kind of taking them numerically. 107 is the CCC contracts or CCC reimbursement program.
107 is under tab 2,
Okay.
and that's numerical order by fund.
In which did you list in tab 1?
I put 107 under tab 2 as me.
All right, very good, thank you. Much of that budget, when I say much of that budget, some of that, the information presented in that proposed expenditures budget is attributable to district attorney's office functions associated with prosecuting and, the expenses associated with it. Crimes that are committed on state prison grounds. And it is only the district attorney's office that has county employees that participate in that function. There are other expenses associated with that function, but there are not, as I understand it, other county employees that derive part of their salary or benefits from that particular function, if I understand it correctly. You have private attorneys that represent indigent defendants who are accused of crimes that have been committed allegedly on state prison grounds. They're paid for out of this budget. There are some, well, there's a whole host. There's investigative expenses associated with that. With private attorneys, they're typically contract type situations, and those bills are seen in here. So what you see in this proposed expenditure is kind of a mix of numbers that the DA's office has provided to Julie, and then also some numbers that Julie has plugged in, if I understand it right, from some other functions. I think the court bills to this function. I think that there are private attorneys that bill to this function. And I think there's also some public defender activities. Ms. Giannotti, to her credit, has undertaken to perform some of the defense of individuals accused of committing crimes on state prison grounds, specifically visitors muling stuff in. Historically, that wasn't something that was undertaken by, Healy didn't do it, Marcus didn't do it, but Giannotti's doing it. And to her credit, she's undertaken that. So I think some of that's in here as well. Yes, sir?
Is this 107, is this 100% reimbursed
Yes.
from the state?
Yes. Yes. This is the program that is administered by Laura Roberts, and Diversify.
Lassen diversified.
Thank you. Thank you. I never quite got the name right for whatever reason. But yes, it is, I think, maybe Madam Auditor can correct me, but I think they've been a little better of late about their reimbursements.
Yeah, there was, you remember a few years ago where they were very lax on slow on reimbursements and running out of appropriation. In the last 2 years, they're running, I think, 1 to 2 months behind and continually appropriating it.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question or a
Yes.
comment, and that's for Aaron's really kind of benefit. The 107 amount in here, it has a beginning balance. We actually, several years ago, we had capitalized, kind of like similar to the Peter thing, where we actually put money in. So we're cash flowing what the state is doing. So this fund I think at one time we put like 600,000 or something of our regular monies into it, and eventually we get it all back, but you gotta have money to pay the bill, so we pay up front and get reimbursed. So this is showing that we started out with 119,000 in the fund, and they're projecting it will end the year next June 30th with 109,000 in the fund. But there's $1 million worth of activity, so we're putting money out and they're getting money back in. And as Karen pointed out, it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's not the first time. Historically, going back to the 80s, the legislature puts in the state budget a chunk of money to cover these prison-related type cases, but they always seem to underfund that. And so early in the fiscal year, your claims go in, get paid, but once they run out of appropriations at the state level, it's not that they don't want to pay you, they don't have any money to pay you with. And we've even had to go to, Senator Cox carried the last bill for us, and that was back probably about 6, 7 years ago, to put more money into that budget line item at the state so that we could get our money. And we've had legislation going all the way back to Senator Ray Johnson, this is in the early 80s, had to put money in, and then they tried to skate on even that extra appropriation. But, so this can be, you know, an area, and we do watch it very closely because
We have monthly reports,
we do, and that's, you know,
and they're usually, they're 3 months.
2 to 3 months
2
is
to
what
3
most
will-
of them for the,
Yeah.
both
Right.
prisons. And what basically what Laura does is she's like a third-party administrator, because the Sacramento bureaucrats don't trust our bureaucrats, and our bureaucrats don't trust the Sacramento bureaucrats. So she kind of presides over the meeting of the minds and vets the claims to make sure they are legitimate and meet the requirements of the program. And I think the system has worked very well.
It is, it's obviously, I mean, there's ebbs and flows over time, you get new staff, old staff alike.
Right.
But the point is that, given that it's a state institution and it draws its own kind of level of crime, if you will, incidental or in addition to having a group of convicted felons in a confined area, we seek to get reimbursement in essence for every paperclip that's bought.
Right.
And I think it's fairly aggressive,
Yeah.
the manner in which that reimbursement is sought.
It is.
Yeah.
And part of the advantage of having Lassen diversified is that there's so many hands in the pot. Like Bob said, there's the DA and the sheriff and public defender. So to coordinate the effort is a huge task.
Well, kind of a footnote to what Jim said. We did have some issues 6, 7 years ago. It did work through and things have been better, like I said, of late. But there was a time when that line item in the state budget would be depleted by,
September,
yeah,
from July. to
because they
September.
had the claims stacked up from the year prior. And so as soon as the state budget was passed, all the claims would flush through from the last year, and boom, it was depleted. And we'd be getting a sort of,
So we were always like a year behind
Yeah.
sometimes getting our
the
reimbursement.
problem with that is, and just taking that and understanding that for just a second, it was the office of the district attorney that had the only employees, as compared to independent contractors, who relied every month, every 2 weeks, on a paycheck from the county as an employee. And so private attorneys who would represent indigent defendants would just seek work elsewhere and find it, typically. They'd get a court appointment here or a private client there. But the employees that depended on that revenue stream as, basically for their existence in the county rolls were exclusively in the office of the district attorney. And so it became a morale issue at times when things would come to discussion point on the floor of the board, and I'd have employees saying, hey man, am I gonna maybe be able to make my house payment next month? Am I gonna have a job?
And when
And it
Schwarzenegger
was-
became governor and they started issuing the registered warrants, we even got a couple of registered warrants for this program. So how do you tell that employee, well,
Yeah.
here's.
Here, catch this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it was-
Thankfully, it has leveled a little over time.
And a lot of it depends upon the state being willing to live up to its fiscal obligation. But this is one of the areas where if they wanted to roll over on you and squish you like an ant, they could do it. So I'm glad to see that the numbers are flat
So the numbers that you see on the 107 budget, 107 fund and budget unit 421 is, we're essentially status quo. The prison prosecution unit continues to operate as basically a segregated unit within the office of the district attorney. And we have 2 full-time employees, including a senior legal secretary and a DA investigator. And then I have a contract with an attorney to provide prosecutorial services as basically a special prosecutor. That's Mr. Howe. And he has been a valued part of the team for many years. So I don't know if there are any specific questions about that budget unit and fund or
We
no.
have a question in the audience. Eileen, go ahead.
Yeah, at the beginning, your statement said you're not requesting any, there's no increase in your budget. And yet, on Fund 108, there's a request for a $4,000 increase, and you were given an $8,000 increase. And on Fund 130, you requested a $71,000 increase. Well, I'm confused. Is increase and decrease different for you and me?
Sometimes, yes.
I believe it.
And
what-
so I'm
the
happy to
71,000
respond to your questions, Ms. Spencer, if you dedicate them to writing and send them to me. So anyone who can examine our conversations later will have no doubt about what was said.
So you're not answering the question where the $71,000 is
Okay, we're going to
going?
continue with the presentation.
Thank you.
Oh, that's, did you get that?
Happy to answer the board's questions about that fund or budget. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
108 is that fund and budget unit associated with the victim witness program, the one of 3 that basically remains. It is the grant that permits us to provide services to victims, basically, of crime, and to help them navigate the court process, to help them understand the status of cases that they have been so impacted by, to also to honor Marcy's Law, which we know is a new, I want to say piece of legislation because it was passed by initiative, by a vote of the people, that afforded to victims certain rights which they had never had before, at least codified or set forth in the state constitution. So there are certain things that victims are entitled to. The Victim Witness Grant helps us do that. We have victim witness advocates attending court regularly. They're there right now. Ms. Salas, the victim witness advocate in the office, is at court right now. She'll be at court this afternoon. She attends most of the jury trials with victims, helps them present claims to the state in terms of the Crime Victims Compensation Program, because there is a fund, in essence, for folks who have been victims of crime to be made whole, and that is typically paid for by offenders. And so that's what this grant provides. Again, as I indicated to you, the majority of it by far is used for salaries and benefits. I don't have any other than minimum